Okay, well, hopefully he'll be able to join us. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'd like to call this special assembly meeting to order. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ms. Allard. Here. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia. Ms. Zolotel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, if you could please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we have the Land Acknowledgement. Mr. Constant?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It's an actionable statement that marks our collective movement toward decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratitude and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you. All right, we only have one item on our agenda today. Item 4A, Resolution Number AR 2021-35, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the United States Department of Treasury to accept emergency rental and utility assistance funds and appropriate said funds. Before I open up the public hearing, I'm going to turn it over to the administration to do a short presentation and give us the facts before us. And actually, before I turn it over to you, Mr. Bockenstead, Mr. Perez-Verdia, have you joined us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you. All right, go ahead, Mr. Bockenstead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jason Bockenstedt, and wanted to just spend a couple of minutes describing the program as we know it so far, and giving some details on where we are, and hopefully laying the foundation for not only the public hearing, but also for the debate among the Assembly members. So, excuse me, with that, I believe many members of the Assembly and public know that at the very end of December, Congress passed an initial round of COVID relief legislation. It was titled the Consolidation Appropriations Act of 2021, and one of the programs that they established within that large omnibus relief bill was a new emergency rental and utility assistance program for those Americans in need across the country. The program included $25 billion, almost $24 billion of that, which is to be distributed to states and local governments. About another $1.2 billion of it was dedicated to Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, and then about $800 million is set aside for Indian tribes and Native Hawaiians. So one of the key features of this package is the ability for local governments to access these funds directly from the Department of Treasury. The previous CARES Act legislation limited cities and counties of only those that had a population above 500,000 to go directly to Treasury to access funds. there was a big change in this legislation brought about not only by the requests that Anchorage made, but many communities and organizations across the country. And what we saw in this one was that they lowered the population threshold to those cities and local governments that had a population above 200,000. So as a result, we were able to submit an application to the Department of Treasury that said we would like to receive the portion that would come to Anchorage directly. And over the last couple of weeks after we submitted that, they went through the process of, I believe, verifying all of the information that we provided to them. Late last week, we received word that they accepted and approved our application, and I believe it was either late Thursday night or early Friday last week, we received $35,431,860 from the Department of Treasury for this program. Now, this is going to be a slightly different program than what we have been running, say, over the last 5 or 6 months. Again, as many of you know, we, through the CARES Act funds, appropriated $30 million for our rental and mortgage assistance program here in Anchorage. That program had very few restrictions placed on it. Essentially, it was a relatively easy application. You just had to verify that you were impacted by COVID-19. This new program, this new emergency rental and utility assistance program, does place some additional restrictions on eligibility. And I'll just take a minute to run through a couple of those as we know them right now. So I think the biggest one that will be a difference between our current program and this one is those individuals that have mortgages are not eligible for any of this funding. So that is a big difference. Anyone that has a mortgage is not going to be eligible for this program. It is only for those that have actual rental agreements with a landlord or, through, maybe an individual house where you're just renting the house or a room. So that is going to be a big change. The others are that the households have to have or are required to have incomes at no more than 80% of the area median income. And they also have to meet certain other conditions, such as one or more of the individuals in the household has qualified for unemployment benefits or has experienced a reduction in household income, incurred significant costs, or experienced other financial hardship due directly or indirectly to the coronavirus outbreak. And this is in addition, not an or, one or more of the individuals in the household can demonstrate a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability, which may include a past due utility or rent notice or even an eviction notice. They maybe are experiencing unsafe or unhealthy living conditions, or any other evidence of such risk as determined by the grantee. So those are the broad eligibility requirements. The other aspect in it is that eligible households that include an individual who has been unemployed for the 90 days prior to them submitting an application for assistance, and those households with income at below 50% of the area median income, we have to prioritize those individuals for assistance. Again, as you can tell, there's going to be a lot more restrictions placed on who is actually eligible for this funding. And then just to clarify, as we know it right now, household income for determining are you making 80% or 50% of the area median income is determined either as the household's total income for the calendar year of 2020 or a household's monthly income at the time of the application. So, you're either going to have to show us maybe an IRS statement showing what your yearly income was in 2020, or you can also show us a monthly income statement when you submit the application. So as we kind of move forward into some of the eligible activities of this funds, there are really two big areas. And I would say one's really the really big one, and then there's a tiny one. So I'll start with the big one. So at least 90% of these funds that we receive have to be used in one of the 5 following categories. 1, rent. 2, rental arrears. And the rental arrears can go all the way back to March of 2020 when the actual federal disaster declaration was declared. So I believe that date was actually March 11th of 2020. 3 are utilities and home energy costs. And again, there is some guidance that has been released by the Treasury Department to date that says that the one utility that is not included in eligibility are those in the telecommunication world. So we cannot help pay at this time for those that are past due on, say, an internet bill or a cell phone bill or something like that. I will just add, as an aside, that I do believe that criteria will likely change as the new Biden administration gets in and begins to kind of look at this program and updates the guidance. But as of right now, that is something that is not allowed. So 4 are utility and home energy costs and energy that are in arrears. So again, those can go back all the way to March 11th of 2020. And then the 5th one is something that we don't have a ton of information on yet, and it is other expenses related to housing incurred directly or indirectly due to the pandemic. And I will just say that in the current Treasury guidance, that is actually one of the questions that is in the guidance. And the response that they have is that the Secretary has not made a determination about what that means at this time. So again, we fully expect that this guidance and some of these things are subject to change over the coming weeks or months, but that is, as of today, these are the categories in which we can spend, or we are required to spend at least 90% of the funds. The remaining 10% of the funds may be used for housing stability services, including case management or other services related to the coronavirus pandemic. Again, as defined by the Treasury Secretary, and I'll just add again that the Treasury Secretary at this time has not defined what those other services are. So that will be something that, again, changes over the next several weeks probably. Again, going back to our current rental and utility program, we really limited that to up to 4 months of support, mainly because, we wanted to make sure that we were hitting those that were having, the greatest trouble. The time limitation on this one, or the max number of months of support that one can receive under this program, including any arrearages and future payments, cannot exceed 12 months. So somebody will be eligible. The 4 months, if they receive 4 months from our program, that is not going to apply to this. This is an entirely new program that, the first payment that you get, that will be considered your first payment. However, I will add the one caveat here is that a grantee may provide assistance for an additional 3 months for a total of 15 months, only if it is necessary to ensure that the household remains stably housed and if the funding is still available. So there is kind of a caveat there, but we obviously will not have to really deal with that particular issue, at least for the next 12 months. The kind of time frame, again, that we're dealing with in terms of obligating this, and again, I expect some of this to likely change a little bit, just like it did at the end of the year with the CARES Act, is that the Treasury Department is expecting any and all of these funds to be obligated by their grantees by September 30th of 2021, or have at least obligated 65% of their original grant. So again, I fully expect some of that to change a little bit as we get closer, especially if we're really following what future federal assistance may come. There is talk, again, of another large federal relief package that will pass likely in the next couple of months that will likely include additional funds into this program. Finally, one of the other things that I just want to mention too is there are a lot more reporting requirements associated with this than there was under our current rental and mortgage program. So some of the information that we have to provide on a quarterly basis on the use of these funds include the number of eligible households that have received assistance, the acceptance rates of applicants for assistance, the type of assistance provided to each household. So some households may not need help for rent, but they may need help for utilities or vice versa. The average amount of funding provided per household, and then the income of eligible household by income tier. So they want us to really break it out by less than or equal to 30% of the area median income, between 30 and 50% of the area median income, and then 50 to 80% of the area median income. And then the final one that we've known to date is the average number of monthly rental or utility payments that each household received. So again, we are receiving just over $35 million. The state will receive the balance of the $200 million that was set aside for the state of Alaska. And then again, I mentioned at the very beginning, there was $800 million set aside for Indian households and Hawaiian households as well. And we do know that there will be a certain amount that we receive in addition to that. So we expect statewide to receive over $200 million for this program. I think the final thing that I would just kind of reiterate again is that while the initial Treasury guidance has been released, it is relatively scant. It's only 3.5 pages. It only incorporates about 14 questions. I fully expect that some of the information that I am relaying tonight might change. And that is kind of the nature of this. We certainly, I think, as everyone knows, we have gone through a different, we have changed over our federal administration. So there will be different people looking at this program and seeing how it is rolled out over the coming weeks. And they will make changes based on how that is going so that we are actually getting the funds to those that most need it. Finally, I do just want to thank a couple of different organizations that we have been working very closely with and that we're committed to working with as we get these programs up and running. First, I really want to thank Brian Butcher and Daniel Delfino and the rest of the team at AHFC. They have been great to work with. They have, met with us multiple times over the last couple of weeks to exchange information, collect information, and figure out how we can roll this program out in a way that everyone, not just here in Anchorage, but everyone in the state can understand and be assured that if they need assistance, they're going to get assistance. The second are both Carol Gore and Gabe Lehman at Cook Inlet Housing. Again, they will likely receive a certain amount of funds through the $800 million. Again, they have been, a key partner with us, working with AHFC, and as a team, we are committed to working with them over the next, 8, 10, 12 months as this program is ultimately rolled out and funds are distributed. And then the final organization is United Way, and Clark Halverson and his entire team. They have been a great partner with us on our current one. We look forward to continuing that relationship as they continue to help us with this one. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing. But again, I do want to just thank the Assembly as well for so quickly setting up a special meeting to get these funds approved as quickly as possible so we can get this program up and running as quickly as possible. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, and await any questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Bockenstead. All right, with that, the public hearing is open on this item. Would anyone like to testify? And I would ask that folks please get in line if you would like to testify. Welcome.
Technical difficulties. Rachel Colvard. This sounds amazing. I am fully in support of this happening for our town at this time. This is great news. I have some questions that maybe you'll take up during your discussion period, like if the total amount was 200 million, and that's statewide projected. Anchorage is 40% of the state population. Wouldn't that be $80 million instead of $35 million that would be allotted to the Anchorage area? So that's where I'm at. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Hello. My name is Carson Brennan Young. So I didn't prepare testimony. I'm just kind of responding to the information that I came up with. But I had kind of a thought I think you guys should kind of keep in mind going forward and how the public is going to respond to this and how you should respond. And the only issue I had that I heard is that it exempts people who have mortgages. And I thought that was a bad move on their part because there's a lot of people that work in the restaurant industry that have been directly affected by this, that have they've invested in their home. And I think they're going to think that this is really unfair. And frankly, I think that they're right. And I think that what the federal government should have done in this case is really distinguish and say people that are directly affected by lockdowns are going to be getting or prioritized for relief. Instead, they went with means testing, and I think that was the wrong move. I think you're going to hear some criticism from the public about that, and I think that you should probably side with them going forward and say, yes, that was a mistake in this bill, and maybe we can pressure the federal government to be a little bit smarter about this kind of thing going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Come on, Mr. Haberman. Welcome.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. On this item, for the public that may not be aware of it clearly, Tuesday night this was on the consent agenda. It was an addendum which meant it went before, on the Friday, that kind of notice. And at that Tuesday night it was decided to separate that item and put it for public hearing tonight. Such a sizable amount of money, and where was the chance for the public to be looking at what's before you? And I want to stress that point. What is before the public? Basically, where's the agreement? You're authorizing the mayor to proceed, the administration to proceed, if you approve this, and there should be a copy of so-called agreement and the details of that agreement, not just give them a authorization without the details. And we heard previously the openness public hearing, an explanation of the administration to this, and I'm glad that you had a few minutes of that. But that's very few minutes for the public to know and you to know exactly what is engaged. Second is that Anchorage, the Metro Borough, and elsewhere that I've witnessed has already had a poor track record in how they're handling federal money dealing with the COVID situation. It appears from this item it's more of the same. There is no question that there's a need out there, and people are hurting, yes. Whether they're going to be able to pay their rent or to pay their mortgage and so forth, whether they're going to have a job tomorrow if they have a job today, and whether they're going to be in business tomorrow or they're in business today. Yes, it's bad out there. But you have a responsibility before you approve something to have an appropriate clarity to the public of what you're proposing to do, and then proceed to make a decision. You're not doing it here tonight. There's approximately 6 people from the public in this room tonight, those who are not aware of it. Only 6. Population here is several 100,000 people that live in Anchorage. And then you also notice the reference that with the feds, they're excusing the idea of it going in between the state because of the population that you exceed a couple 100,000, so that you don't get the money from the state, you're getting it directly from the federal government. And that is a concern because next door, that population is over 100,000, and why should you have that advantage and they don't? Or any of the communities out there have that link. And then I'd like to say is, where's the performance of how you've already operated with federal funds? And the concern that you have nonprofits involved in this scenario, and you're taking it out, you've been moving out of the picture and leaving other entities involved with the picture of who is getting the money. And that distance concerns me greatly. So what you should be having here, not at the last minute, is a full disclosure of how you've handled the money and who's getting it, and closing this month, how much money and how many applicants are going to be able to be taking account of being receiving that money.
Thank you for your testimony.
You do have opportunity for questions.
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Amber Glasser, and I wasn't going to testify on this, but I do really agree with the other people that have testified, and I'd like to echo what they're saying. I am a homeowner who's been out of work for 10 months, and I don't have renters, so, you know, this is great for everyone, and I appreciate that, but I don't see how it's going to help me and my family. And there are a lot of people in the restaurant industry who are homeowners or who wanted to buy homes, and then that was put on hold. So we really need to reconsider how we're going to allocate these funds and make it fair to everyone who's suffering from this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a quick question for Mr. Bockenstedt, or at least a issue to flag. I know that towards the end of the last rental assistance program, landlords were able to batch the applications for tenants, and that was really helpful. But it sounds like with the current eligibility requirements and documentation, that may not be possible moving forward. So I just wanted to flag that as an issue for us to explore as we look at the implementation of this. But otherwise, thank you so much for the information.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Zalatil, if I could just briefly respond and say that it is our current understanding that we can probably still do that. That is actually one of the questions that they did talk about in the FAQ that has been released. And it basically just says, you know, kind of what outreach can a grantee do to a landlord or utility provider, and essentially says that we can make reasonable efforts to obtain cooperation of landlords and utility providers to accept payments. So we fully expect to continue that, because I think, as you mentioned, that has been something that has been, I think, very valuable and has really helped us, help the most amount of people in our current program.
Fantastic news. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Yes, just a couple items. I understand that there are some funds left over from the previous relief bill, the rent and mortgage relief program, and that we intend to reprioritize those funds for mortgage relief. So I would like to hear from the administration if that is still potential, so that the people who do have mortgages who are left out but haven't yet qualified in the previous program with the 3 payments can. Then, when and how do people apply is the second question. And finally, a comment that the 80 million versus 36 million is very frustrating, and it wasn't our decision, clearly. That was decided by the Department of Treasury, just like the decision that the funds can only be used for rent versus mortgage. But I have been in conversations with members of the state legislature in both houses from Anchorage to ensure that the difference is made available to Anchorage residents and not just taken off the backs of our neighbors. So those 2 questions, will we be using the previous relief for mortgage, and how and when do people apply for these funds?
So, through the chair, Assemblymember Constant, I might take your last comment and your last question first, and then likely turn over the question on your first one to either Clark or Mr. Schutte, who I believe are both either in the room or on the line. So, kind of your first or your second question, which was when will this program be available? That is something that we are in conversations with both AHFC and Cookman Housing. We're working through kind of what a uniform application will look like. Our hope is that over the next, I'd say, max week or two, we will have something that is going to be ready to be announced and available for individuals to begin accessing. So much more to come on that. And again, we will be very, very open and try to get the word out as widely as possible to as many folks as possible that need this. We want to make sure that anyone that is in need of assistance knows exactly where to go. On your other comment in terms of the 80 million versus the 36 million, that was also our original, I think, understanding of how we read the statute. But as we dug a little deeper, talked with some folks at Treasury, what they ultimately did was essentially use the same formula that they did for the state and local assistance program under the CARES Act. So what that meant was that 45% of that $200 million was, quote, kind of set aside for what would be considered funds available for state and local governments. However, since we were the only one in the state that qualified because we had a population above 200,000, we then got what our population percentage for the rest of the state was out of that 80 million. So the 45% that was set aside should be set aside for local governments was roughly 90 million. And since we are about 38 or 40% of the population, that is how we got to the a little over $35 million number, or at least that's how it was explained to me by folks at the Treasury Department. I will just add that, again, Brian Butcher and folks at AHFC have very much said that they fully expect that a large portion of the remaining 160 million or so that the state has, a large amount of that will have to be used in Anchorage. There's just no way that they will be able to use that amount of funds everywhere else. So we do have that commitment from them that they do plan on working with us to ensure that not just $35 million is available here in Anchorage, but a significantly larger amount actually will be. And I will just take this time because I know a couple of people during the public hearing made this point about mortgages. We absolutely agree with you, and that is something that we have raised both our congressional delegation and different organizations that we are a part of, such as the Conference of Mayors, National League of Cities, and others. And I believe that other jurisdictions across the country are raising that same concern, that it doesn't make a lot of sense to exclude mortgage holders from this assistance because they have been hurting just as much. So that is something that we hope Congress will relook at over the coming weeks and months and hopefully make that change. But that is something that we will continue to advocate for. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Schutte or Clark Halverson with United Way to answer your first question.
Thank you. Through the chair, Chris Schutte, Director of Economic and Community Development. I will add to Mr. Bockenstedt's story about the need to adjust the federal program to accommodate mortgages. That's being heard loud and clear across the country. Our jurisdiction is not alone. The testimony earlier about the industries that are most impacted by COVID-19 resonates across the country and is a very similar situation from coast to coast. So I believe that Congress and the new administration are hearing it loud and clear. We, of course, are keeping a close eye on it and using the channels available to us through our lobbyists as well as through the national groups that we belong to, like National League of Cities and others, to continue and advocate for adjustments to the program that will allow mortgages. For the first question, though, about a way of prioritizing mortgages with the remaining funds here in the municipality. So the $6.4 million that were appropriated at the end of December are currently essentially spread out for the next couple months here and will be fully spent The bookings to take advantage of that program, of course, started right after the announcement of the appropriation or the approval of the appropriation in December, and those bookings run through that full $6.4 million. So between the ability of the program to batch applications, whether that's through directly through the landlords or through some of the trade groups that we've worked closely with, like the hospitality retailers and Alaska Char and others, we've been able to essentially front load that program with eligible applicants so that as we get through January and February, United Way is able to distribute those funds to the landlords of those programs. In the batch of money left to be spent, the estimate is about 20% at the top end are actually mortgages currently. And I don't believe there's a way to change that at this point, given that the program was rapidly subscribed and that we've got the $6.4 million essentially spoken for between now and March. That being said, I think the two things to take away from this conversation is that we've got money that's about to hit the street. I know that a couple of members have reached out to me asking questions about people that were applying at the end of December and when they will actually get in the queue to have an appointment or receive a check, and those are, that money is forthcoming. In fact, I believe there's about $2 million worth of checks hitting the street as soon as Monday of next week. So that money is being deployed, those appointments are being made, and those applications are being processed. But right now it looks like about 20% of those are going to be mortgages, the 80% balance being the renters. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have two folks left in the queue. If we can please try to keep these questions and answers brief, that would be helpful. Never mind, one person, Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was just going to take myself out. My questions have been answered.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. All right. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Yes.
Ms. Solotel?
Yes.
That item is approved 10-0.
Mr. Chair, quickly, just a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Constant.
None of us said thank you to the administration for putting forward an application literally days before the applications were broadly disseminated to the country because they had been in talks and had the documents needed. And so to you guys for being in front and getting this here in front of us immediately, I am very grateful.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to final audience participation. Would anyone like to speak? Welcome.
Thanks, Felix. I signed your recall. Hello, my name is Amanda Forrester. That's F-O-E-R-S-T-E-R. The level of hypocrisy in this assembly is reprehensible. Your lack of moral integrity eviscerates our confidence in your ability to make decisions for this city. On January 26, 2021, a member of the public was held to a different set of rules because he shares the radical leftist views in which the majority of this assembly believes. Even though he was admonished, he was allowed to carry on with the personal attack of an assembly member simply because the rest of you are foaming at the mouth with hatred for that person. For the record, I'm going to read a transcript of his testimony with the names changed to those of other assembly members. I expect not to be silenced by the assembly just as he wasn't. Over the past weekend, Felix Rivera used social media to abusively gaslight Anchorage citizens about Nazi symbology and ideology. Specifically, he defended Third Reich and Führer license plates as innocent, non-hateful, and unrelated to Nazism. He did so after being presented with evidence that there could not possibly be a reasonable non-Nazi justification. Either out of willful ignorance, evil malice, or both, this member chose to make excuses rather than confront the reality of a Nazi supporter in his own community. Nazism was a scourge upon this earth that killed 20 million people in Europe, including 6 million Jews, members of my family among them. Over 16 million Americans, including my grandfather, fought against fascism and Nazism in World War II, and more than 1 million of them were killed or injured. Forrest Dunbar is a disgrace to their memory, a disgrace to the uniform he wore, as well as a disgrace to this assembly and city. At this point, the good people of Anchorage interjected, demanding that this person's testimony be cut off, as he was blatantly breaking the rule of no personal attacks. He was allowed to continue, even given extra time to testify. I commend the assembly member who then did what the chair could not and admonished the speaker about the rules. Nevertheless, he was then allowed to carry on with his diatribe. Allow me to continue. Cameron Perez-Verdia appears to have deleted individual comments and then his official assembly Facebook page because he did not like what he was hearing from constituents. That itself is an anti-democratic act of political cowardice, surely worthy of our collective opprobrium. At this point in history, there cannot be good faith dialogue with Nazis, Nazi sympathizers, or Nazi apologists. I urge every member of this assembly and the administration to ignore and reject all legislation advanced by Member Weddleton, because upstanding Americans have no reason to engage with Nazis or their apologists. He should also be removed from any committee assignments for the same reason. I don't request that lightly, but the Assembly must take steps to protect its legislative process and citizens from someone who will act out of ignorance and malice. Similarly, this Assembly should not give voice to Ms. LaFrance, who gaslights constituents in order to make excuses for Nazis. Nor should this Assembly let Mr. Peterson speak for all of you. Accordingly, the Assembly should take immediate action to remove Ms. Salatel as co-chair of the Committee on Homelessness.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amber Glasser. I've been an Anchorage citizen most of my life. Cameron is my assembly member. I want to start by letting each and every one of you know that I love you. I love everyone, no matter our differences, because life is precious. I bet we could all have a real good time on the dance floor at Myrna's together. You're probably thinking, you don't even know me. That's partially true, but I've been watching and getting to know you for the last 10 months, and if people can hate for no reason, I can love. Do you remember when we could put our politics aside and come together and have a good time? These mandates are destroying the love we have for each other. The masks are destroying the love we have for each other. The hate and misinformation being spread by everyone, but especially the media, is destroying the love we have for each other. We are so divided, more divided than I've ever seen. Crazy thing, I have known and loved all these people in this community for the last 20 plus years. That includes all of you. We've never had any problems. I could care less if you're a Democrat and liberal. I could care less if you're a Republican and conservative. I consider myself fiscally conservative, but liberal on social issues. Now all of a sudden we are being consumed with a bunch of distractions while all of you abuse your powers and spend our money like an out-of-control teenager. Where's the unity? Where is the love? Where is the compassion? You all speak like you care, but your actions tell a different story. Who is benefiting from the lockdowns? The rich. Who is suffering because of the lockdowns? I am. I'm middle class. The poor. They're really suffering. Who's benefiting from the lockdowns? Again, that's really important. The rich. But who are we mad at? We're mad at each other, just like you guys wanted. I want to share with you some warning signs that you may be drunk on power. The leader thinks their rights and needs outweigh those of others, so their decision-making is all about what works best for them. The leader stops listening to the ideas and opinions of others, believing that their knowledge and insights hold more weight and value than others. They believe they are smarter than others and have little more to learn, and so they stop seeking out new ideas and diversity of thought. Remember, when you start to think that you're the smartest person in the room, it's time to find another room. If you only heard one thing out of this testimony, I hope it's the part where I told you that I love all of you. No matter how disappointed you make me, we are all in this together.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman, Alaska resident for 43 years. When dealing with the COVID issue for Alaska, I see many in Alaska looking the other way and saying, I don't want to be a party to it and help each other. I see a distance. It's happening in Anchorage, it's happening in the Valley, it's happened with our governor of the state. When this governor of our state recommended a long time ago to the beginning of our discussion on COVID and concern, he recommended social distancing and he recommended mask wearing. But even with those recommendations in May, as I reported, he attended an event in the Valley, Memorial Day service, where he was not wearing his face covering and where he was not social distancing. I've witnessed continued elected officials, not necessarily here respectfully, you're trying, but particularly in the Valley, where Valley elected officials resist the idea of wearing masks. They resist it. The leadership on that issue on mask wearing is coming from the school board and administration out there. And for those who were addressing the Valley last night, they're incorrect with what is going on out in the Valley. Number one, it is a wild, wild west. But even with that wild, wild west that's going out there, the leadership is out with the school system. Children are in school, but they're extremely cautious, and they have what they call it a living plan ongoing to see as time goes to what to deal with the COVID issue. It's hard for everyone, but I also like to remind you too about who's hard to. When reopening the schools, one needs to recognize, and I speak to the Valley, who's thinking about the idea of not wearing face coverings, the idea is that if they want those teachers in school, if they want the staff in school, and they say, okay, take off the mask, more likely the teachers out in the Valley are going to say, we're not going to be part of that, and we're not going to be teaching in those schools. That is what's going on right now in the Valley. They're starting to change because there's been an ongoing resistance to do our part. Many are confusing freedom with responsibility. And the minimum we can do on this is, number one, is wear these face coverings. You are going to have a public hearing on the issue of face coverings. But I've already witnessed how that has played in other communities, particularly in Palmer, where Anchorage residents come out there and say, you shouldn't do it. And I, as a member of the Valley, witnessed going to a meeting where it's limited for people to be in the room and no telephonic, and elected officials not wearing face coverings, and recently an elected official in the council who had COVID comes in and doesn't wear a mask because he says these words, I already had it, I do not have to wear it. This is the level of what we're dealing with. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Welcome.
Rachel Colvard. So we should not have the mask mandate. It's going to come up. You're going to hear a lot more about it, but Mayor Berkowitz issued the emergency order. The mask was going to be a thing on the 29th of June, and I'm at that weird age where the eyes don't work no matter what the distance. The state put out the COVID-19 Alaska clinical update for the most recent one, Thursday, January 21st. It has this pretty little picture. You can pull that up. When Mayor Berkowitz put that in, it was right there when we were in the low. Whoops. And by all accounts, we've had pretty good masks. People have been wearing the mask, right? They keep telling us, oh, you're doing good, you're just a little farther. But if it went into effect way down here, and all this last year, since the end of June, all the way, we've already been through it. And we've had pretty good mask wearing, but now our case counts, the average is coming down. I don't think that the science bears that out. Whether you think masks work or you don't think they work, or you think COVID's real or not real, or what, it doesn't matter. The data has shown us now that we're over the hump and we're on the downward slope of that. I really don't think that we should put that into an actual codified law. We're on the downward slope. And what, now we're just, this is our new fashion statement? No. Open Anchorage up. Let us get back to work. Let us make our own money, pay our own rents, pay our own mortgages. We're going to make more money than we ever will accepting federal dollars. Just a little bit of math, like having heard the thing that was the item tonight, and congratulations on doing that. I really fully support that. That was a great thing. But even at 35 million, and then ballpark rent, $1,600, is about 1 month, we can pay about 21,000 people's rent. Or for 1 year, we can pay about 1,800 people's rent. It's not nothing. It's something, and it's very much needed. But if we can go back to work, we can make our own money. We're grown people. Encourage masks. Encourage people to wear them if they so choose. People are probably going to wear them. You've instilled the fear. They've got it. The only thing to fear is fear itself, and we've done a bang-up job. Let's everybody calm down, and let's just get back to work. I promise you, you will probably still have very good compliance with the mask wearing, and we can all just go about our business like we did before. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Anyone at all? All right, that'll complete our final audience participation. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned. Sorry about that.